Think about this: Venezuela, a country rich in oil, suddenly becomes the center of global attention. On one side, you have China investing billions in its economy and infrastructure. On the other, the United States perceives this as a direct threat to its regional and global interests. In this video, we will break down, step by step, how China's economic footprint in Venezuela developed, why the US considered it a strategic threat. Are these tensions contributed to military action by the end? You'll understand the hidden forces behind this complex geopolitical story. For much of the 20th century, Venezuela was one of America's most important oil suppliers. Oil shaped the economic and political relationship. However, when Hugo Chavez came to power, he nationalized oil companies and aligned Venezuela with China and Russia. From the US perspective, this was more than politics. It was a shift in influence. Washington responded gradually with diplomatic pressure and targeted sanctions, focusing on oil exports and financial systems. By doing so, the US hoped to limit Venezuela's alignment with its rivals. Now let's look internally at Venezuela. Sanctions certainly affected oil revenues and limited international trade, but internal factors like corruption, poor governance, and mismanagement compounded the crisis. Hyperinflation skyrocketed, hospitals struggled, food and medicine were scarce, and millions of people left the country. Experts say that while sanctions played a role, the Venezuelan government's own mismanagement made the crisis severe. The country was no longer just an economic problem. It was a political and social flashpoint. Here is where China enters the story. Over the last 2 decades, China made massive investments in Venezuela, billions of dollars in oil-backed loans, infrastructure projects including ports, roads, and energy facilities, strategic partnerships with state-owned Venezuelan companies. From China's perspective, this was economic cooperation, but from the US perspective, it signaled growing influence of a global rival in America's own hemisphere. Analysts describe this as economic foothold translating into strategic leverage. Why was the US alarmed? Energy security. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves. If China controlled or had priority access, global energy markets could be affected. Regional influence. US policy historically views Latin America as its strategic backyard. China's presence challenged that long-standing sphere of influence. Military and intelligence risk. Even if China's involvement was economic on the surface, any infrastructure and ports could potentially support military logistics or intelligence operations. Experts argue that the combination of these factors created a perceived threat that could justify preventive measures. Venezuela became a chessboard for global powers. China expanded its influence through loans, trade, and partnerships. Russia maintained strategic and military cooperation. The US viewed this as a dual challenge: economic leverage plus potential military risk. Analysts often call this a proxy stage in global power competition. Venezuela wasn't just a country in crisis. It was a testing ground for global influence and control. What actually triggered US military action? While no single public event is fully confirmed, experts speculate strategic infrastructure such as oil terminals and ports under foreign influence, possible intelligence or logistics concerns, rapid deterioration in political and economic stability. US military measures were targeted, not full-scale invasion. The goal, according to analysts, was to limit China's strategic foothold while maintaining regional dominance. Officially, the US stated, protect regional stability, safeguard energy markets, prevent foreign interference. Analysts argue, energy security and control of oil supplies, sending a strategic message to China and Russia, maintaining long-term influence in Latin America. This demonstrates the difference between public narratives and strategic calculations. The world reacted cautiously. The United Nations called for restraint and dialogue. European nations emphasized diplomacy. Neighboring Latin American countries remained largely silent or neutral, fearing economic and political fallout. Meanwhile, global oil markets reacted immediately, reflecting how interconnected Venezuela's resources were to global energy stability. What does this mean? Venezuela shows how economic influence, especially by a global power like China, can escalate into strategic and military tension. The conflict is a warning that great power competition is now global, extending into regions historically dominated by the US. The real question is not whether the US was right or wrong, but whether the world is prepared for similar conflicts in the future. In geopolitics, power moves rarely stay contained, and the consequences often ripple far beyond one nation.